is a delight, and how can focusing on our delights help us live the fulfilling life we were meant to live? Those are the questions we're going to attempt to answer today. I'm here with Matt Bain. He wrote our very first guest post for the Expectation Gaps and is also doing our very first interview for the Expectation Gaps. So trying something new today. His post was an introduction to the concept of a delight, and it was also a call of action to all of us to make recognizing our delights a daily practice. And his post was inspired by a book written by Ross Gay, which I know you're not going to be able to see on camera here, but I have it here. And it's entitled The Book of Delights, appropriately enough. And it's a book of essays that Ross wrote over the period of a year. And Ross introduces his book with these words. I'd like to read just a little bit of it. He says, "One day, last July, feeling delighted and compelled to both wonder about and share that delight, I decided that it might feel nice, even useful, to write a daily essay about something delightful. I remember laughing to myself for how obvious it was. I could call it something like the Book of Delights. I came up with a handful of rules. Write a delight every day for a year, begin and end on my birthday, August 1st. Draft them quickly and write them by hand. The rules made it a discipline for me, a practice. Spend time thinking and writing about delight every day." And I am intrigued by the concept of a delight because to me it's just another form of deliberate thinking. It gives us another tool to use to realize our full potential. But enough from me. We're going to turn it over to the man of the hour here. And Matt, how would you define a delight?
Well, my view that's slightly or mostly colored by Ross's and looking up the exact definition, and then Ross talks about it as being something that I knew that, but I just hadn't thought about it in a while, or
right.
It's just something I know that just came to me, like why did it take so long for me to shift focus over and think of it in another way?
So it's something that's triggered, it's more of a thought or a memory that's triggered by something that happened during your day?
I would say it's another way of looking at something that, looking at something, an object or an experience that you come across, a visual, taking the time versus when you just pass something and you see it, or stopping and taking a full breath, or even, just opening your eyes fully to it and just sitting there and forcing yourself to take it in.
So reflecting on it.
It definitely takes reflection. There's plenty of times where I pass things or I don't think directly about it, and then when I first started this, just thinking of it more of counting your blessings. So think of it sort of like a blessing, an imagistic blessing. When you go back through your day mentally and you're thinking, well, I have to write something, then all these different phenomena start popping up. Like, oh, yeah, I forgot that even happened.
Just
or when you're speaking about your
once
day.
you sit down and actually start going through the exercise, you start having thoughts. Like, you start thinking of delights, or however you want to say it, that you wouldn't have thought of if you weren't writing it, if you weren't taking that, making that a practice.
Correct, yeah. For myself, when I go back through the day, automatically things start to pop. I just keep repeating the word things, but, so it could be, they talk about an essay, I had categorized them into a visual or an experience that you might have been a part of. It could even be, a lot of times when you're writing, even when you sit down to write, you start thinking of different words, and you want to know, what does that word exactly mean? You even start to look at the words differently. What is that word? Something like ephemera or ephemeral, maybe most people don't use that, but
right.
if you're writing that as a writer, you'll use these words.
Is that most people don't use it. And that
itself
is a delight.
Or even words like legitimate. We say things like that, and then we go back, and if you really stop, what does that mean?
Right.
Legitimate. Where did those sounds come from? What is the root of that?
So even that makes it seem like something you take for granted. It's partly recognizing things that you take for granted, even like a simple word like legitimate that you hear well, especially now, people overuse it. Even that, it's recognizing something different about it.
Yeah, I would.
That you may have taken for granted.
I can't remember the specifics, but a psychologist, philosopher, Daniel Robinson, was talking about, I want to say the term is heuristics, or what we use that makes us so successful as a species to be able to, live at light speed and to adapt and to create all the things that we, to create the human world that we've created and how it just exponentially builds. And that makes us so efficient as a species.
Right.
But on the spiritual side, what it can do is that when we live at light speed, we are going past without taking notice of a lot.
Sure.
So now I think we're starting to look back. There's all these different little maladies that we don't even realize. There's nothing really wrong with us. There's nothing wrong with you, but then why do I feel like this loss or this empty spot? Then what's wrong? So if there's nothing really wrong, then what is wrong? Where does that feeling come from, or what are we missing? And I think maybe we've gotten to the point where we've almost ran past the best mark, and we think that that's our best feature as a species is just exponential growth.
Right.
But I think maybe we've missed the mark a bit in how busy we are.
So is that how you could see the light? So as I mentioned, how at the beginning, how can we use a delight to live the fulfilling life we were meant to live? Is that how you would see it being used? Is that you use it to slow yourself down, to pull back from the bombardment of information that we're getting and the bombardment of thoughts we get on a daily basis, and you use it to pull back from that and recenter yourself almost?
Yeah, I would look at it along those lines. For me, I know if I don't sit down and write at the end of the day, and there's a lot of days that I don't get to do it, or I'm thinking in my head, this is a delight, or I might tell my partner and say, oh, you know what happened today? And sometimes I even say, well, wait, let me write it down, or otherwise I won't. And when you're writing it, it's as if you didn't even live it until you wrote it and read it.
Yeah.
So when you sit and so writing takes time, and that's another reason I like to write it by hand. Just because you can have fun, see it in your own hand, it takes you longer to write it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And as you're writing it and you're reliving it slowly, because we can't write at light speed with a pencil.
Right.
I mean, you can't write it clear. I mean, at least even if you wrote shorthand, and all of a sudden you go back to that experience and you live it, versus
right.
Passing by, say, a billboard, and you read something on the billboard that interested you, and it gave you some insight, or just it jogged a memory. Like the other day, I saw a billboard that said it's for this place called CareLink.
Okay.
Right on 28th Street on the main street in Grand Rapids, and the first part of the sign, it says "Lift your spirits." Then it says with one of our lift devices. I think they're like lift chairs and different lift devices to help people with lack of mobility or the elderly. But I just remember I just read the lifters. I know the sign, but I read just on purpose, read the top part, and I just took this huge breath when I read it.
Okay.
And I almost felt elevated off my seat, like it's as if I had not really been breathing. I don't know why lift your spirits. I thought take that full breath, and I realized I probably had not been taking full breaths through the whole day. I hadn't had a reason to. I hadn't exercised or that yet.
Right.
And it felt as if to levitate off the seat, like as if the seatbelt were the only thing holding you down. And now, in a way, I was looking for delight. Some days I'm looking for something, so I do experience it in the moment. But later I might have, that's what I wrote about later. I wrote it out, and when I wrote it out, I was able to live it. Because you can't, you're driving, it's like, stop, pull over.
Well, that's an interesting thing to equate it to breathing, because it is almost like taking a breath at the end of the day. Well, okay, so back up. Assuming that we're journaling, I guess is the right way to say it, or is the delight. So, do you journal a delight, or is the delight the process of the journaling? It's kind of a circular thing. Or
I think writing in your own hand is such a joy. Just to take the time and not to have to follow any. As a writer, you always want to try and write your best. But even for myself, when you're writing in a journal, I can do whatever I want. I don't feel bound, and that's the way that the book is written, which I loved, because you don't feel like you have to. If it was going to be write a poem at the end of every day, that's a pretty. First you have to know how to write poetry, and I've been studying it and been reading it, and then you have to adhere to some form.
Right.
But with essayettes, or just basically it means journal writing.
Right. Just free
you
form,
can just relax.
stream of thought.
It doesn't have to be like a beginning, middle, and end. It could be anything. Like some of his are paragraphs, and that's perfect. If you're doing it later for a setup, like I went back and rewritten mine for other people to read, then I'll give a little. I do try to write them a little bit, like with a little setup, but.
Well, to me, too, one thing I thought of as far as the writing it by hand, too, it takes out the element of perfection. Because I think I'll see if you agree with this or not, but the point of it is not to be perfect, because I feel like in our lives there's so many devices, there's so many tools, there's so many techniques we have to try to make everything perfect. And in this case, when you're just writing by hand, you're just writing free form, you're kind of letting all that perfection go. And this is the moment I'm in right now, here's what it is for what it is, and you just get it out. And so maybe it's a way of releasing us from this world that expects us to be perfect all the time, too.
Yeah, there's no wrong. If there's no wrong, and when you're writing in a journal, there's nothing wrong that you can do. And that's another, even though as much as I love writing, as much as I've studied, read, and written, it's nice for me to be able to use my craft, but not, and be like, there's nothing, it's my journal. There's no writing professor, there's no comment section, I like, the criticism in general is good, it just makes you a better writer, but for this, it's just nice. And I think there might be, I've thought about that before, that speaking about Robinson again, or anybody talking about the human species, what differentiates us, the idea that we have a language that's made of abstract figures. So we're the only species that has that ability for abstraction, abstract thought. So we don't even think, you're writing these figures that are based on figures of all the way back to the very first alphabet. Before people even wrote, before they even used the idea of abstract figures to write, like going back, say, to the Greeks, then the Phoenicians before them. I know the Greeks adapted. The Greeks took the Phoenicians' alphabet and put vowels in it. So it's just crazy to think, like, where all that comes from. And then a machine is not making the symbols for me. I'm making these symbols all the way back to, ancestors making symbols to represent, words, thoughts, emotions. And even, I think that probably has something to do with it.
Yeah, it's almost like a timeless thing. That's not the right term for
it.
It's
being human. It really is.
It brings you back to the core of being human, in a way.
I don't want to make, it sound like a Hallmark thing. Sometimes when I think having those ideas, like, oh, that's kind of corny, but I didn't intend it that way.
Well, no, but we do need to reconnect with our humanity, I believe. Because everything in our world pulls us away from it. Or not but so many things do pull us away from it. So maybe that's a part of it too, is it helps us just reconnect with humanity.
Yeah, if we're not involved,
through this practice.
Some of us aren't involved with a lot of abstract, we're speaking, communicating, but as far as written communication where I see it, and I wrote it with my own hand, and then, like you say, reflected, like, reading it back. A lot of us just aren't involved in that on a daily basis.
No.
So all of a sudden there's a I don't know if you call it a paradigm shift. It's just like any object you have where you are taking it, turning it, and looking at it. It's like, oh, this is an imitation flower. The glue that holds it together, somebody folded these pieces and put those together. Like, that's a whole other experience.
Yeah.
That, when I look at how intricate that is, so somebody took all the time to do that. However, a lot of times we pass by these something like this in someone's house, it's just something that looks like a flower. But then there's a whole experience and world into that, not even to mention where all those pieces came from.
Yeah, true.
Like where all
and
that
how
came
they were made, and and how they ended up in some store, and then someone bought. I mean, if you go back, really every single piece of that is amazing, and we take for granted how amazing we really are. I think.
Oh yeah.
That we put all that together.
Think about how much experience that we met. I mean, we have to, but this is what I mean by living at light speed. When somebody refines this from a mineral, or if this is, I don't know if this is real paper. So somebody, retrieved that from a tree and then went through a process. How many hands did that go through before it got into a store? Someone went and bought the product. They took the time to make it. Like, where did they figure out how to make it? Did they look online? And so somebody else's ideas connected.
Oh, true.
So if you just think of the light speed, I go to Michael's, I look up on YouTube, I make it, I sell it. But even then, you spread out from that.
Well,
it's just like spreads and forks and forks and
whole,
forks.
Yeah.
It's amazing, and that's what our life is so fast now. But then a lot of times it would take you hours, maybe days to research. Like, say, where did that come from? Like all the way back to the tree. Assuming that's real, paper. I don't know, the tree that it was processed from.
Right.
And that'd be just that one thing. You could write a book about that. It's crazy.
Oh, for sure.
How many connections that we.
When I think of it, what I've seen, even I haven't, unfortunately, I haven't even made it through the whole book yet. But from what I've read so far, too, that's what I see. Is it almost like as he is writing about one thing, it triggers another, and it triggers another. So it's kind of like what you're talking about, where you end up just going down this rabbit hole, or spreading out all these roots that start coming, all these ideas and thoughts, and coming from one idea that you started with.
It's good you brought that up. That's something I didn't even go into in the writing of the essay. That probably, if I wrote a second section to it, or if I was talking to somebody about it, the beginning is just to enjoy and write those delights down. But and I had to parse his delights for the excerpts that are on the site. But if you ever, I assume you linked maybe like a whole, or we could link like.
Yeah, there is a link to the book. Is that what you're saying?
A link to the book, or a couple full. There's some of the full delights online. I think directly at his website.
Oh, okay. I'll have to.
And we could link that, and hopefully people would read some. I mean, there's some that. The delight itself might be a paragraph. You could get across the delight in a paragraph, but a lot of delights, there's one, we're going to I'll often talk about his father, his mother, race, ethnicity, racial injustices, triumphs, histories, and he's going back into his own history, he's remembering, so it's the delight itself is, for him, a lot of times it's a piece. So if you're writing in a journal, and this is another thing I enjoy about it, I'll write that piece, but as I write it, it'll take me, I get to go to other places that I forgot all about. I mean, I forgot, things that even happened like a year ago. I forgot that.
With all these weird connections in your brain.
That was an amazing thing that we did, or that we went through, or even with Emma, I think there was something.
Emma is our daughter, by the way. And I never said that Matt is my ex-husband, but so and if you've read some of my other posts, you might know that name, but you might know that, but.
There was something that Emma brought up, and I'm already forgetting, but there was something on the way home that, like, I forgot that we did that like that way, or that happened. That's crazy. And that was only a year ago.
Well, yeah,
how many things, and then there's things.
Even stuff that happened yesterday, or stuff you just gloss over. Or it's interesting to me, too, that different people see different things, because even when two people are, reminiscing or something, whatever, about something that happened, and they'll both have a different account of it. It's similar, but not the same account, because even in the exact same experience, well, it's not the exact same experience, but the same set of variables, two people experience it completely differently.
They can, for sure.
And so that's interesting, too, because, like you say, Emma remembers something that you don't remember, and she probably remembers it differently than you remember it, and different things stuck out to her.
And that even brings up another facet. You know, most of the time you won't disagree with the facts if two people write about the same experience within a day or so. However, you had to have experienced it at least slightly differently with your own sensory equipment. And when you write something, even in your memory, we know for certain, based on scientific study, that memory fills in all these blocks, and it fills in gaps, it brings things together. So you actually, this is the crazy thing about this, is that you actually relive the experience probably better than you could have just lived it. Because your mind
because when you're
puts
in
it together.
there's too much going on.
So you get to relive it, but your mind probably also enhances it. It's like taking a film that you know, and then somebody going, like somebody that's a film tech going and sharpening it and making it perfect and editing and just making it. And so it's like the HD film version of what you of the gritty, like, rough draft you took. Not that either's bad, but you get to live it twice, and it's like an alternative or adapted. And it's a whole other. I think you need a whole other post on that about how memory.
Yeah, we might have to do that.
I've read a bunch about that, but there's a Netflix special that it's like a 20-minute. The Mind Explained, where it has a 20-minute. I'd recommend it to anybody. You could probably post something with that. It's fantastic.
Yeah, check that. I've seen that. I haven't checked it out yet, but
it's very quick. Gets the point across expeditiously.
I want to come back quickly, kind of start wrapping things up here. But come back to, you were mentioning that Ross would also write about racism and discrimination, or like things that aren't necessarily positive. Like, you think of a delight as, because of the word itself, you think it has to be something that would normally be seen as positive, but it's also about embracing things that would normally be seen as negative too, and appreciating that experience, or at least I think that is what it's partly about, is embracing both the good and the bad, and appreciating the bad along with the good. Is there something right in the beginning there about that?
I wanted to remember exactly how he words. Of course, I don't want to burn up a bunch of time.
Oh, no, that's fine. But
no, but he talked about that the delights can happen in spite of the. Delights could trigger negative emotions or bring up a situation that's bad, but the idea would be to work your way through it.
Right, okay.
And if those experiences are there, but you're not working your way through it, then they're like unseen psychological thorns anyway. So, yeah, he had a way to phrase it, and of course I won't be able to find it even though it's on YouTube.
Yeah, I know, and that's in the post. I know exactly what you're talking about.
I did quote it.
Yeah. But I want to turn quickly to, because I want to help as many people out as possible and give people as many tools as possible to start thinking intentionally, start getting through whatever they need to get through in their life, to start living an intentional life and live the life they want to live. So in the post, you mentioned that you've experienced intolerable pain in your life, and that when you look back, what you mostly remember were the good things that brought you out of that pain. So my question is, because I'm sure some people watching this right now are experiencing intolerable pain, and maybe are in that dark moment that they need help coming out of it. Do you think doing this daily practice of writing down your delights could help when you're in that moment of intolerable pain? Would you even be able to see the delight at that point? Would it ease your pain, or is it something you have to get through the pain first and then go to the delight? Or what are your thoughts on that?
As long as you have either this, as long as you have a book like that for guidance, or, and I hate to say it, like, I guess I wrote...
Almost like a mentor.
Yeah.
You almost have someone to mentor you through it.
I would say, I didn't consider it at the time, but when, when you're saying that now, probably part of the reason I took the time to write the post, because it's not like I had to write the post or that there was any like, oh, this post needs to be written. Like, why did I take the time to do it, or why did I feel like I wanted to do it after reading his book and writing about his book?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure subconsciously it is because your growth, your delights grow, your joy grows as you share them with more people.
Okay.
But also knowing that myself, if I would have come across a post like this and somebody said, oh, you should read this, you should check this out, I wanted to write something that I, in that moment, could have read and gotten through and said, I can do that, and I can try it.
Yeah, I know
so
exactly
maybe it
what
was
you're saying.
To help. I assume now that part of the subconscious motive was to help me where I would have been in the past, or meet people that were like me. And I would hope that it would get through. Because usually when you're in that sort of pain, you're looking for things. You're looking for something, anything.
Yeah, anybody
a lot of times
that you can not latch onto, not the right word, but something that resonates with you. Someone that you can tell has felt your pain or has been through what you're going through.
That's why I added what I added at the end, because I didn't want it to sound flippant.
Oh, right.
I didn't want it to sound cliche. I don't want to make it sound like my pain is that much greater than anybody else's.
Or you just write it away and all your pain's going to be gone. It's not that at all. And I don't know that you even, this is a whole other tangent, but I don't know that you even want your pain to be gone, because your pain is what is teaching you what you need to know in this life. And so it's not even a matter of getting rid of it necessarily, but it's a matter of working through it. But yeah, and I could see the delight, like you said, and maybe it would pull you out of your pain, because, as you said, when you spread, or however he said it, when you share it, it spreads exponentially. Or he found that delights were exponential, and they grew. The more you shared them, the more they grew. And so maybe once you recognize one delight, you would recognize another, and you would recognize another, and that combination would bring you out of your pain.
Or it would give you something to look forward to.
Oh, true.
But it definitely, when I talk about the lift the spirits sign, I was in that point of focused positive. I was trying to make sure that I was staying positive throughout the day, and I was looking for things to latch onto, or things to enjoy, or so I was out looking. There's other days where I forget till the end of the day, and then I think I should write tonight. What will I write about today? And then you'll think back and like, that was the coolest thing. Like I talk about a number line at the end of the post. If you had if you had an overall bad day, there had to be what was the least bad thing. Like if you're going to be like, if I want to be as pessimistic as I've ever been in my life, like it was a horrible day. There had to be at least horrible. And you could even have fun with that.
Right.
You could have fun with that. It was ridiculous. Like, why did that? Even
when you see it on paper too, sometimes you realize how ridiculous something is, or how small it is. Like it feels big in your head, but then when you see it on paper, you're like, okay, that's not a big deal at all.
It's definitely given me the ability to laugh at things during my day that before I would have just thrown. Everybody wants to throw things across the room every once in a while, but it's given me the ability to just outright laugh at something when it happens, like when you drop or break something or you forget something, like, oh my gosh, how did that, seriously, did that happen? And you're actually able to laugh about it because I'm thinking about it now, like, I'm going to write about that.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Versus,
when it's a habit.
I'm going to throw this across the room right now.
Right.
I'm so upset.
Yeah.
Those
already thinking I'm going to be laughing at this later, so I might as well laugh at it right now. Yeah.
You see it through the reflection. You start to see things through. You start to see the reflection of the thing you're in.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
interesting
experience.
Well, speaking of reflecting, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you before we wrap things up for a delight from your day so far today.
I would say visually on the way here, not wearing sunglasses on purpose. I try not to unless it's super bright in the summer because we don't get very much light, and the sun was just really was sort of directly in my in the driver's side window on the way here.
And this is the first day. For people watching, we were in Michigan. It's winter. This is the first day we've had sun in a long time.
For a while.
So, like a full day pretty much of sun.
And driving here, so the sun's coming in here, and as you're driving, the clouds, the sky was mostly clear of clouds, like there was a background haze, but they were right along the edge of the earth, like, you know, where you can see the rim of the world. It sounds strange to say that. There was like a sort of almost like a pie crust of clouds, like everything was there, but then driving down the expressway, it culminated into like a small mountain. So it looked as if you were in Colorado or someplace where you're driving toward a mountain, but it's a cloud.
Right.
But visually it looked, I told Emma, like, look over it looks just like a mountain, like we're driving toward a mountain. And I've always loved that visual. That was just one of a couple things. So that was probably my favorite so far.
Alrighty, well, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for taking the time to write the post and to sit here with me and do this. I really appreciate it. My delight is that we're just sitting here doing this because, as I mentioned, this is my ex-husband. You know, a lot of people wouldn't be able to sit, and now we're able to sit and create things together. You know, even though we're not together anymore, we still take care of each other, and we're still able to do this type of thing together. And to me, that's a huge delight. So I really appreciate that.
It's something taken for granted.
Yes.
Just hearing from different people that are in similar split family situations where things don't work out very often at all, and there's always an animosity. And I can't imagine. So to take that, it's one of those things you sort of take for granted, but until I hear other people's stories that I work with or friends I know, and whoever it could be, you're hearing one-sided, but just the tension that's there, regardless of whose fault it is.
Right. So. Exactly. So just to think intentionally about the situation and let it go. But so on that note, we both, I think, like to encourage you to develop a daily practice of delighting in your delights. And of course, I put a worksheet together for you guys that will summarize the post and will help you take inspiration to action. And until next time, stay curious.